couple of months ago in September, as many of you may know, the EU finally pushed through the European Chips Act, which is something that Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, first brought up in 2021. And I think we can all remember the phase during the pandemic where it was impossible to buy a new car or even to order a washing machine in some places because of the supply chain problems that had arisen as a result of the pandemic. And that was a real wake-up call for companies and governments, both in Europe and in my country, in the United States, that it was really time to start thinking about bringing back semiconductor production to the domestic market. And the United States has pushed forward with its own plan, which is about $200 billion. And Europe has a plan, as we will see in a moment, that is a little bit less ambitious, but still quite significant. So the last time I was here, I was speaking about the German economy and all of the kind of headwinds that the German economy is facing and kind of the dire outlook of the German economy. And I was told afterwards by some of the people in the audience that it was so depressing that people were taking out razor blades. So I've decided to be a little bit more optimistic this morning about Europe and the chips. And that's why I'm saying that the glass is half full. It could be fuller, as I will discuss, but I think overall in this space, Europe has acted quickly and is making some very important first steps. This shows the current situation in terms of chip production in Europe. It's at 8% of the global market, and the goal is to get to 20% by 2030. Now, the significance of this is that this market is expected to explode, and it's going to go from currently 566, I think, but about $500 billion to $1 trillion by 2030, if those projections are correct. Now, as a journalist, I am sort of a professional skeptic, to be honest. So I would take all of these projections with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, I think that it's fair to expect that this market is going to grow significantly in the coming years because so much is being shifted into the digital world. And we all know the degree to which we rely on chips already, from our cars to our dishwashers to our watches, et cetera. And that is only going to increase. And one of the reasons it's going to increase in Europe in particular is because of here you can see the market curve going up towards $1 trillion. And as I say, I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. One of the reasons that it's going to go up so much is because of this green transition. And the more heat pumps and the more electric cars are out on the street, the more chips we're going to need, which is one of the reasons, I think, for this European initiative. Now, these are the planned investments across the world. As you can see, the U.S. leads there with $200 billion that they're planning to invest in chip production, but also in R&D, which I'll get to in a second. Europe is at 43, and you can see that the Asians are also a little bit higher. Now, the question here is whether Europe's focus is really the right one, because they're investing primarily in production. And the European Commission is hoping that national governments will step into the breach and put more money into these initiatives with subsidies, basically, which we've seen in places like Germany, for example, where you've had significant investments by the government to build new factories, in particular an Intel factory in East Germany, where the German government is putting $10 billion alone into that, and they have several other investments that they're planning there of similar magnitude. Just to put this into perspective, the $200 billion that the U.S. is planning to spend, that's double Bulgaria's GDP. So this is a lot of money that is going into this. This is where the market is now in terms of where the chips are made. You can see that Taiwan dominates, and then you have South Korea is also a major player. Others would include Europe. The first company you see there, the Global Foundries, is an American company, and then you've got sort of other firms, which would be the Europeans, and that's where you can really recognize that this needs to expand pretty dramatically in the coming years if Europe is going to be able to hold its own in this space. So this is, again, a similar look. These are the individual companies now and their market share, and you can see, again, that the Taiwanese companies are just far and away the market leaders here, which presents a substantial challenge to the Europeans, and I think is why European governments are inviting those companies now to Europe to say, well, you can build factories here rather than trying to kind of reinvent the wheel in Europe itself. Europe has some chip manufacturers. There's Infineon in Germany, for example, but nothing on the scale of what the Asians are doing. So the hope is that they will come here and invest in production locally. This is a kind of a deeper dive into some of these numbers and some of the planned investments. And I think this is quite important because I apologize if this is in German, but this number right here shows that this is what the Americans are planning to put into R&D. And the significance of that is that if you're investing in chip R&D, you're investing in the future, you're investing in innovation, and that is really where you get the value added, and that is what ultimately drives prosperity. Now, if you're only investing in production, which is what the Europeans are doing, this 43 is primarily production. That's also important, but it does need to be accompanied by significant investments in R&D, especially in an area such as chips, which are constantly changing. You constantly need to be able to innovate to keep up with the competition. And here the European strategy is to rely on national governments to do that. And the question is, will they step into the breach? Because as we know, national budgets across Europe are quite strained. And so this can be a difficult argument to make in many cases, but it definitely pays off. And if you look at the history of technology in the United States and the degree to which it has managed to promote innovation through tax breaks and other effectively subsidies, it's quite extraordinary. And here you can see when China and South Korea, it's 150, and that's all directly from the state. So I wanted to just go back to the roots a little bit, as I've put it here, to talk about the history of innovation in Europe itself. Now, I think a good case study to look at what is possible in Europe is Germany, is the former East of Germany, which has some similarities to Bulgaria, in fact, in terms of its history and the history of technology in that region. This was the first computer that the East Germans developed in the mid-1960s. It was called the Robotron 300, which is basically a copy of an IBM mainframe computer at the time. And it was, fairly successful, I guess, for the time. And it was developed then, into more modern computers later on, and this is a model that they introduced in the early 1980s. But the result of that is that when the wall came down and foreign companies were looking to invest in Europe, technology companies were looking to invest in Europe, where did they go? They went to these areas in Eastern Germany, which had this tradition of of making computers, of making microchips, and so on. And this is the current situation today, where you see these clusters. I don't know if you can see the names of these cities, but so this is Dresden, where it's the biggest cluster, and you have some of the biggest names in sort of the global chip industry have major presences there, and then in Leipzig up here as well, and then here in Chemnitz, which used to be called Karl-Marx-Stadt. And I think this is a really important point. It's just that once you invest in the education, in the ecosystem, in these communities, it has long-term benefits. And we're talking about decades that this has continued. There obviously ups and downs. I mean, this is a very volatile industry, and I've seen, just in the time that I've been covering Germany, which is about 30 years or so, as a journalist, there have been huge swings here. At one point, Infineon was thinking of closing all of its production, chip production in Dresden, for example, because basically the bottom fell out of the market. The Asians were quite strong, and there was this sense that, chips aren't that important anymore. It's a commodity business. We're just going to put everything in Asia. And well, now we know that that really wasn't a very wise strategy, and everyone is scrambling now to ramp up production across the West. So this is another kind of look at some of the longer-term impacts of these investments. I use this example because I'm from Arizona, and I remember as a child hearing about Intel and all of the investments that Intel was making and how exciting that was. And here we are 40 years later, and they're still investing, and these are massive investments that Intel is making in the United States, in my home state of Arizona. And I would argue that really has driven prosperity in that region. Phoenix, the main city in Arizona, is now the 5th largest city in the United States, and it's still one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing. And this development has really been driven by companies like Intel, tech companies coming in and working together with the universities and with research institutes and so forth to create this kind of an ecosystem. And I think that is something that a country like Bulgaria, which also has these natural advantages because of its history going back to the communist period as a center of technology, as a center of computer manufacturing. I think at one point 40% of all the computers in the Comic-Con came from Bulgaria, and that unfortunately has fallen a bit to the wayside, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't come back and that it couldn't be revived, as we've seen by the example of East Germany. I think the question is there political will to do this? And I think what we just heard from the mayor-elect is that there is, and I think that is clearly a very encouraging sign. I mean, he said that I think you have all the pieces here, you have all the parts, and you just need to put them together. And I think that is going to be crucial, not just for Bulgaria, but for the rest of the European Union in the coming years, in order to kind of keep its competitiveness with the United States and with Asia. Because otherwise, Europe is going to lose more ground. And I mean, I think it's also obvious that you're not going to become Taiwan overnight in Europe. But if these projections are correct, if this global chip market really evolves into this trillion-dollar industry by 2030, this is a pretty short period of time. That's only 6 years away. There should be enough for everybody there to tap into this growth. I wanted to close with just a bit of inspiration. This is the original computer invented in 1939 by an American named John Atanasov, whom some of you may be familiar with, whose father was actually Bulgarian. And I think it sort of is a reminder of the innovative powers that are available to you here in Bulgaria. And I hope that you take some inspiration from that as you think about the future and hopefully the prosperity of your beautiful country. Thank you very much.